Peace. What's good, YouTube? It's Red Reams back again. So today we're gonna get into just a little bit on the movie Little Buddha, which has Keanu Reeves starring as the Buddha, and this movie came out back in like 1993. And one of the key scenes that really caught my eye was when the Buddha's first starting out on his journey. He's not even the Buddha yet. He's just, a man from the royal family, a prince that gave up his wealth in pursuit of discovering the truth, discovering what's really going on in the world. Because if you think about it, he was a rich royal man, royal prince, born into, he has everything. And the minute he sees beyond what his parents are trying to protect him from, he starts to question what the world is, because now he's seeing death, he's seeing suffering, when all he really knows is luxury and pleasure. That's normal for him. So when he sees something outside of that, he starts to really question. And one of the first things that he does as he leaves his royal palace, leaves the royal city and everything, is that he comes across a group of ascetics, or monks almost. This is like the closest thing I could really say, but people practicing asceticism, which is just self-denial and abstinence, abstaining from the world. In case you don't know what asceticism actually stands for. So, and a lot of us practice forms of asceticism through religion, whether we think so or not, especially if you're one of those people that takes religion seriously. And even if you don't, whoever's been following this channel for a while, knows that before I taught about semen retention, still do teach about semen retention, still do teach about nofap and different ways that you can use forms of asceticism to better yourself. Will it bring you to enlightenment? Depends on who you are. Enlightenment isn't really characterized by what you do, but by what you know. That's why enlightenment, when people say that they want to know something, they tell you to enlighten them. So it's not necessarily based upon the actions of the flesh. And even Krishna talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita, because you get too attached to the things that you do, you start to worry about the results and the fruits of what you do, rather than just doing things and understanding and learning things for the sake of learning them. Your spirit's gonna guide you in the way of knowledge, rather than you constantly trying to get something out of it. You're gonna get what comes out of it, and your spirit's gonna translate it in whatever way is best for you. But one of the things that really caught my eye with the asceticism scene is that when the Buddha, what's happening with him, I can't put this clip inside the video because of copyright reasons, so I'm just going to explain it. So what ends up happening is he's trying to get some water, trying to get some food. He's been living off of water and a grain of rice a day. Some crazy shit, but people do this. People really do this in all different types of spiritual walks of life. They think that they got to fast that much. They have to take a long journey, live out in the woods, all this crazy stuff. And you know what? That might actually help you, but what they were getting at in this movie, he was figuring out this isn't really it. Why I gotta do all this stuff? He was going through in his head. He's playing with the hogs in the water and shit. Like he looks crazy from the viewer standpoint. And then there's a lady passing by. She has a whole bowl of food and she's trying to offer it to him. And his group of ascetics, they're looking at him like, you better not take that shit. Like, if you take that, we're not fucking with you anymore. So he's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna eat this. I'm gonna eat this rice. I'm gonna drink this water. Because if I don't do it, it's like, is it really a path worth following? And that's what kind of opened his mind up. So you can see when he does that, they're kind of looking at him like, why did you do that? Not only is he interacting with a girl, because you gotta think about it, a lot of ascetics, they believe in complete abstinence, so you don't really interact with the opposite sex like that. But on top of that, he's breaking his fast, he's indulging, and they're not messing with that. So they're telling the man that becomes the Buddha in the future, we don't mess with you anymore, we're not following you, and that's it. You're not a part of our group anymore. And they walk off and they leave him. Little do they know, he becomes the Buddha later on. So, and he's telling them, he's like, the path to enlightenment is the middle way. And what he's really saying behind that is that the middle way You have to think about things in terms of polarity, which is another law of the universe. So remember, you want to study and really get a full understanding what the laws in the universe are. And those are the laws of Tahuti. So learn those, understand those. One of them is the law of polarity. And so that means there's two extremes. And this is what he's saying. He's saying, we don't live a life of extremes. If you live a life of extremes, that means you get caught up in a polarity. So you get caught up in going right or you get caught up in going left. And the whole time you're going all in one direction, you're forgetting all the knowledge and experience that's in the other direction. Or even in between, because you're only looking on one side. So you're leaving behind everything that's to go in the other direction or to get along the way in favor of what's on the other side or what's in between. Why can't you take lessons from one side and lessons from the other and make it your own thing? That's bringing spirituality into it rather than bringing rules into it. This is the difference between what creates a spiritual system that you create from within versus just following what other people are doing. So initially he's just following what other people are doing. This is an example of bad followership because he's innocent, so he doesn't really know. So he sees ascetics doing things and he thinks, oh, maybe I'll find my enlightenment that way. That's his spirit saying, you know what, you're going to go through something and people aren't going to agree with you, but you're going to get something out of it in the long term, in the long run. So he goes through it. He realizes that this isn't really his group of people, but what he got out of it, he went his own way. And essentially, once you start going your own way and you find the resistance between you and other people around you, that means you're getting deeper into the spirituality of things, deeper into yourself, because you're going to start to find friction in areas that you're at in life. So let's say you start practicing what form of asceticism we're going to add to this. Let's say you start practicing fasting. Your form of fasting is intermittent fasting. People want you to eat whenever they eat. Let's say you're married or something like that, and your husband wants you to eat at a certain time. Your wife wants you to eat at a certain time. You're saying, I'm not doing that. I want to do this at a certain time because I'm trying to intermittent fast. I'm trying to get these, do this cut real quick, get in the gym, do this cut, whatever the case may be, right? That's your path. So you start to find the friction. That person gets with the program, or they'll try to change you, but if they really love and they care about you or they really respect you in general, they're going to let you do your thing. So his followers, them leaving just because he changed up and he came across a different set of knowledge, and later on they came back. They came back once he saw that he gained his own following, he started his own thing, and he really, really took it to the next level because he discovered new things. They realized that, maybe we didn't see something. Not saying that they're fake for that. Maybe they learned something in between when they disagree with him and later on. Whether the fame added onto it or not, whatever the case may be. But what I am saying is that if he had stayed a follower, he would have done a disservice to himself. So one thing that I've learned, and I actually got this from the military, but there's something called effective followership. Effective followership means you're not just blindly following people and what they say, what they do, how they say to do things. You don't just blindly follow people. And I thought this was interesting because you'd be surprised that the military is teaching people this, because you have to think about, okay, well, the military kind of turns people into robots if you think about it, but that's not necessarily the case. That's only in the initial phase when they're trying to make you into someone who's fit to be in the military. But who you become after depends on you, because people start to slowly slip back into who they were over the course of their time in service. But one of the things I really got out of this effective followership lesson was that there's different types of followers. And what makes you an effective follower is, like, let's say someone becomes a leader, for example. You can be a leader, but being an exceptional leader means you also know how to follow, how to oscillate between the roles, because leadership and followership, they're both polarities. So when the Buddha is saying the middle way is the path to enlightenment, he's saying you need to learn how to balance both sides of the force within yourself. So you can't just be an ascetic and complete abstinent, but not know how to indulge in a balanced fashion. You know what I'm saying with that? So you have to learn how to balance things in life. And this is why whenever I was teaching nofap and semen retention, I was never hardcore, you have to do this. I say that I strongly recommend it because it's important, especially if you don't know how to control your desires and you don't know how to control your mind, you don't know how to control your body's running it for you. I think that's important, but I'm not saying that it is mandatory. I'm not saying that it's the way to enlightenment. I'm not saying that it's the way to succeed. I'm saying that it's something that I tried that worked for me, but you can try something else that works for you. And that's essentially what being effective towards people that are learning from you is really about. You're not telling them things and not giving them the tools to succeed. So an effective follower, what they do is they're able to give feedback, or they're able to, communicate in a way that benefits an entire team. And they're able to do things in an active fashion. They listen actively. They're active within the team. Or even active within whatever group they're in, whatever the case may be. They don't just do things blindly. They don't just say yes to things all the time. They're always constantly learning and using that. And they learn how to balance that between, okay, well, now it's my time to lead, or my time to take initiative, my time to do this, my time to do that. And so that's what the Buddha was really getting out of it too, because he's learning as he's going. So he turned himself from a follower into the leader the moment he started talking about the middle way. He was effective following for himself. Then he's like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I need to step forward and do my own thing. That's the difference between being an effective follower and being just a blind sheep doing whatever blind sheep do. Because if, let's say he just kept doing that, he probably would have died out in the woods eating one grain of rice a day. Probably would have died or something, whatever the case may be. And that's why you can't really go with two extremes. Some people their spirit might be here so that they can go through an extreme because they went through a different extreme in another life. There's many different ways that we're experiencing life here. It's just all different types of spiritual things going on. And I think one of the best ways that we can really, move out of the current system that we're in is learning to really think for ourselves. And, you don't want to just think a certain way just because it's been done a certain way all the time. You want to actually take what's going on and kind of improvise and forward think into something new. So that's something that I thought was interesting about what the Buddha said and what he did. Whether that's a true story or not, but that's something that I thought was important, because even if it's not, let's say the Buddha didn't exist, it's still a story that you can apply to yourself, because you're supposed to see yourself in the Buddha. Everyone's supposed to be a Buddha. That's why in The Power of Now, he says to become the Buddha, not just follow him. You can become someone through those actions, become someone who understands their middle way in whatever situation that they're in life, wherever the case may be. So whenever you're being taught things, you have to understand that you're getting someone's interpretation of whatever information is being put out or wherever they got it from. You want to be able to take that interpretation, see if it applies to you, and then reference backwards, and also just see how you feel about it, how it can really apply into your life. You don't want to just take all the information and just run with it and then just talk about it, because it might not talk about it or try to live it. You want to implement things into your life, see if they work, get your experience, and then and only then, that's when you start to really understand. And he said, another thing that he also said, he said learning is changing. And that's very important too, because if you're not growing every day, and plenty of people say this in different ways, if you're not growing, if you're not experiencing something new, you're not learning, you're not changing. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, how are you growing? How, it's repetitive, but you have to constantly show some form of progression. You can't just go to the gym and lift the same weight all the time. You have to show some form of progression You can't just stay, lifting the same 20-pound weights when you know you could probably lift 30 pounds if you actually challenge yourself. So this, when you start to get comfortable, you start to build a box around yourself, and now you're boxing yourself in, creating a matrix around yourself. That's not really how you really want to live, or how you really want to go about your spiritual path. Or maybe for some people, you might have to go through that, and then once you get fed up with that, fed up with the same routine over and over again, which is probably what led you there in the first place. But once you get fed up with whatever routine, life's gonna force you to change. The universe, which is what a lot of people like to say, universe is constantly changing. So why wouldn't you? Has anything in life ever stayed 100% the same? You have to ask yourself that question. Most of the time, it hasn't. In some way, shape, or form, something is going to act on it. So that's how you also have to be about yourself too. Things are always constantly going to change, and you have to also just be ready for that, and just understand whatever lessons come with it. So that's just a little discussion about the Buddha, the little Buddha. I want to go into more parts of that movie too, just because I found it really interesting. I watched it recently. I didn't even really know the movie existed, but it was a part of a college assignment, so I just found it nice to talk about, because obviously it still applies to this channel. Us learning spirituality, through media, books, TV shows, games, anime, whatever the case may be. All of this stuff I consider it, an avenue to knowledge and growth, and I always say that you're the one leading yourself there. You're the one making the choices to grow, to go forward, to push forward. So really take that in your hands. Try to take the information put out in this video and really see where you can go with it. So I'm gonna link where I watched it, because I think I watched it on YouTube too. I'm gonna link that in the description, and also link whatever other Buddhism books that I might have read that you might find of use to you, and that Power of Now book too. So make sure you check those out. Use them to really benefit yourself on a spiritual journey, because there's many different things you can pull out of it. Things that I pulled out of it was, understanding I don't have to be, fully committed to just one little thing. This is one thing I learned early in my spiritual journey, because it was like I went from Christianity to Islam for a little bit, and then as I came out of Islam, what helped me really come out of religion in general was just the overall big perspective that Hinduism offered. But I never got into the religion of Hinduism, because I didn't want another religion. I just wanted the truth at a certain point. But it helped me come out of it, because who's a channel? Simple Hinduism and the Bhagavad Gita too, just in general, the way it presents things is like you get a whole different understanding of how everything really operates when you start to feel like no one has a monopoly over the truth. I think that's something that he said in his video, the Simple Hinduism channel. But that guy he had a really nice way of putting things. And so when I actually got into the stuff, that helped me as I was coming out of religion. And I always read the source materials too. Like even when I was religious, I always read the books over and over again. I read the Quran, I read the Bible all the time. So that helped me really come out of understanding that this is just one source, but it's not necessarily like you have to live by this book. This is the only book, and everything else is bullshit. Because if you put out all the other things, you're not gonna get the vast amount of knowledge and transformation you can get from the Hinduism side of things. And so you might just be believing what someone else is saying about a whole different culture, a whole different spiritual tradition, and it might not even be true. The same thing is like, let's say if Buddhists were saying stuff about the Bible or the Quran, like it was just completely useless and it was not good for spiritual information at all, I'd be questioning that too. So we have to really understand like just the amount of religious programming that's going into like butting heads. That goes back into the polarity of things, because when religion was introduced, it was introduced off of previous spiritual traditions that already existed for centuries, decades, whatever the case may be. They took teachings like like teachings from Christ, and how that went from Gnosticism into Christianity, because Jesus wasn't a Christian. He couldn't have been. So if he couldn't have been a Christian, what was he? He was a heretic and a cult leader in his time. They made a religion based off of what he says so they can control the message and run game on people that don't know anything about it. Because now that they can control the message, now that he's dead, now that he's executed, now they can turn it into whatever they want and have people fighting over it. That's why nobody really agreed on who he was and what happened with him for the first 3 centuries after he allegedly died. So, and the same thing goes for the Buddha too, because there's still discrepancy on what he taught, and people made a whole bunch of different systems after what came after him, instead of just saying, what he said all this and that's it. So, and he even told people, like, you're supposed to figure things out for yourself. But what do people do? And this is what humans do all the time. They take what someone said, change it up, and they put in their ego, their greed, and whatever they want out of certain things, and use it for their own benefit, for their own survival. But these spiritual teachers and mystics, which are just regular people, just like you and me, they're telling you that this is all within you. You figure out the answers from yourself, whatever the case may be. So that's just something to really look at. That helped me come out of the whole, butting heads thing, the whole one way and everything else isn't true. You have to really find your own path, and you have to get out of that fear mindset, because I see that's what stops a lot of people. They're so entrenched in the fear based off of what they were taught when they were kids, especially in like the Abrahamic tradition too, Christianity, Islam. They're so entrenched in it, and they have this fear of stepping outside of that. Even though they don't even 100% believe in the religion, they still have fear of stepping outside of it, but they question it. They're not even 100% in. They're just doing it because they're so scared something's gonna happen to them. And I want to say those same people, they have problems in other parts of their life too, when it comes to changing and learning and understanding new things. Because I find these are like the same people that they want to do something new, they want to be great in a certain area, and they're too lazy or too scared to start, or they find some sort of excuse. And the only way you can really find your way out of religion is to be like, okay, I have questions, let me read things, let me learn things, understand, and research, and actually do legitimate research, legitimate work, and legitimate learning, and find out the truth. It's that simple. It's that simple. But you've been trained to get your spiritual information from somebody else, from a preacher or whoever's standing in front of you in whatever religious setting that you're in. Get it from someone else because they're more learned than you. All they did was read more books than you. Maybe they don't even read a book. Maybe they just take stuff out of context and just talk about it from a group of people and sound like they're intelligent, but they might not be at all. You have to ask yourself those kinds of questions, because whoever might be in front of you, they might not have your best interest in mind. So really ask yourself, really read the book, and read the books that you read, and really see if what's taught in your church or whatever, does that even align with what's going on in front of you. So that's just something to really take into question, so you can get out of this whole polarity thing. You want to be when it comes to spirituality, you're looking at things from a whole universal perspective. Every book matters. This is why I even integrate video games into this, because I don't like video games and anime into this, because there's a certain viewpoint on how video games are based off what the media says, based off what most people think. Most people just think, oh, video games are just entertainment. Some people say they were a waste of time. And they'll go around and they'll do things that are 100% even more of a waste of time. I see video games as a way to learn. There's a million different ways to look at this. So you take it and you find out what's inside of it. It's that simple. Because there's something to offer in everything. That's really what synchronicity and learning is really all about. Can you find a lesson in everything that's going on around you? Because when you start to see that and you start to understand that form of synchronicity, just by really questioning, why is this happening around me? Why am I seeing this commercial? Why am I seeing this arrangement of cars in front of me? Whatever the case may be, just look at things. Really look at things and try to see the spiritual message. Don't look at it too hard, but like try to see the spiritual message. That's another gem. Just another little thing that I found for myself that you could look at in day-to-day life and see if that works for you too. That way you can learn the language of the way your spirit's communicating with you. Another thing is to write down your dreams. Look at the symbols in front of you in your day-to-day life. Those are little things you can do to figure out your own path and your own messages, so that you don't have to rely on other people's information. But I think that's a topic for another video. But thanks for watching. Wish you all luck in your journey and peace.